afternoon. I'm Anuj Mehrotra. I'm the Dean of the George Washington University School of Business, and it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to this summer episode of George Talks Business. Today's session is co-sponsored by the George Washington University College of Professional Studies, and I want to thank Dean Liesl Riddle for this partnership. Today, we are going to discuss issues surrounding cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and emerging technologies, and talk about the risks and challenges that lie ahead. And what a great panel that we have to discuss these. I'm delighted to introduce our distinguished panelists, starting with my far left, Pablo Breuer, Executive Director for Security Policy, Control Oversight, and Regulatory Alignment at Morgan Stanley. Welcome.
Thank you.
Sally Kenyon Grant, Vice President, Darktrace Federal. Glad to have you here. And Renata Spinks, Assistant IT Director and Deputy CIO of IC4, Headquarters, Marine Corps. We will also be taking questions from the audience towards the end. Please do submit your questions via Pigeonhole using the QR code. And I think the QR code is right on the desks around you. So please take care of that. So let me start. Let's get started. Let me start with the first question, and I want each of you to give me a very short answer for this one so that we can get warmed up for the real questions after that. But, I have been watching in the last few weeks, my wife has made me watch this very scary show called it's a British television show called Black Mirror. Now, I don't know if any people in the audience have been watching it or not, but, it's dark, it's often unsettling, and it's really showing, as far as I can tell from the few episodes that I've watched, unintended consequences of technology which may have been meant to be very, very good. So let's get started. Now think about artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, what kind of unintended consequences we might see in a couple of years. And I'm always thinking that we constantly think about how we use human intelligence to be able to conquer or counter cybersecurity issues and other things. Do you see in 2 or 3 years that perhaps we will need to use non-human intelligence to counter what artificial intelligence is going to be presenting the challenges with? Pablo, why don't I start with you?
Yeah, I think that we will. I think the best use of artificial intelligence is actually human-machine teaming. Where we get ourselves into trouble is when we let the AI operate autonomously without having a human on the loop to verify what we're doing. We can do some wonderful things with AI, just like any other tool. We can do some absolutely horrifying things with AI. Most of our technology problems aren't technology problems, they're people problems. So we need to keep people in the loop.
So Sally, would we be able to trust non-human intelligence to fight this artificial intelligence?
Well, I have a big statement. I would say that we are beyond human speed at this point.
Wow, we are going to hold you up to that in the next 30 minutes, and let's go to Renata after that. What do you think, Renata?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I probably would say is that I think of it from the reverse of that is, how is the cyber criminal going to take advantage of the being beyond our human ability to consume and process information very quickly, and having that human being in the room. So if I was a cyber criminal, I would attack both of those vectors to cause doubt. So
I like this attack business already going on. So let me start with you, Renata. How do you foresee artificial intelligence, machine learning, quantum computing impacting cybersecurity at Marine Corps and more broadly at the Department of Defense? And what are some of the risks that you are seeing, and what are some of the unique challenges that you are facing for this audience?
Well, I think first, we have a data problem. We have a people problem, but we also have a data problem. I think the people problem is probably the most critical. But we have a data problem. Bad data in, bad data out, right? And so if we have, large language models that are programmed with erroneous data or outdated information, then you can't say that it's the machine's fault because you're getting an outdated answer or decision. So that's one piece that we're concentrating on. The Marine Corps has gotten after that by hiring our first service data officer. So that they can work with the DOD's Chief Data Office and Artificial Intelligence, the JAIC. So we needed someone who was just focusing on data to come in and help spearhead that. And then the second piece is, like you said, quantum computing, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the thoughts of a cyber criminal. And how are we going to get after that? And so we call it think like the criminal, think like the adversary. And how do we make sure that the greatness of artificial intelligence and machine learning is not thwarted by bad actors who are trying to, cause doubt. And the risk of that is very high because we, in the Department of Defense, from a weapons perspective, and what we're seeing across the nation right now with the many conflicts that are going on, and the main one that is in the news every day, which is the Ukrainian and Russian war, there's a lot of lessons learned there. And a lot of blind spots that have been highlighted that we're starting to look at to say, how do we take those lessons learned and try our best to be proactive?
Yeah, well, thank you for that, and I know this is of course very intriguing and very, very timely conversation to have. But Sally, let me turn to you for some of the top cybersecurity priorities for you at Darktrace Federal right now.
I think the priorities are, to Pablo's point, is augmenting the human SOC team, the security orchestration team. And I think that because we are at the place where the attacks are coming in at machine speed, we have to my point earlier, combat them with machine detection and response. So it's machine-on-machine warfare. And we are completely in it. The human teams can learn from the machines. The human teams can be augmented by the machines. One of our most critical military bases has been looking at, can we take a walk down the hall and get a cup of coffee for 2 minutes? Mm-hmm. Yes, but you must have that layer of unsupervised machine learning, supervised machine learning, and AI to have that extra level of coverage because the attacks are so furious.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So Pablo, let me throw another thing that scares me every day. And I was watching this video which was suggesting that if you can get 3 seconds of somebody's picture, after that you can actually create that picture as if that is the person. At least most people would believe it. And similarly, just a few seconds of a video and somebody can be really producing the entire video of me talking or my daughter talking. And now suddenly I'm thinking, here's a call comes in, sounds like my daughter, looks like my daughter, talks like my daughter, asking for my bank account number, social security number, and whatnot. How am I going to protect myself from something like this?
No, that's a great question. Historically, in cybersecurity, one of the very weak points we've had is authentication. Mm-hmm. Authentication is the bedrock for all cybersecurity, and there is no math model that describes authentication. So what we've done is we've added duct tape to it. First it was passwords, and then we added password complexity, and eventually we added multi-factor authentication, and then we thought about doing biometrics, but realized if we do biometrics, I can only change my password 10 times. And so things like very large movements of resources now get done via either phone calls, get authenticated via phone calls or video calls. Well, if I can take an open source tool and recreate somebody's voice with only 30 seconds of video, that's not the future. That is a publicly available tool now. Now we've got real problems with authentication. And so that's the challenge. Now, add to that, we live in a very social world. Find me a chief executive officer, chief technology officer, chief operating officer for a Fortune 500 that doesn't have a video on YouTube lasting at least 30 minutes. And you realize I have everything I need to create a deepfake video. The internet has been great about democratizing technology and capabilities. Unfortunately, we've democratized some really bad and dangerous capabilities. The ability to reach a mass audience used to belong to heads of state and heads of church. Now we live in a world where an entertainer can reach 50 times the number of people as the President of the United States via social media. And they don't have any gate checks. They can just put out whatever they want. And that's one of the reasons that we have this massive problem that we have with disinformation. And that's before we get to deepfakes, just using AI to generate massive amounts of data, bots that like and retweet posts. And you end up with a real problem, particularly when it attacks foundations of democracy like trust in our elections.
Absolutely. By the way, I think I have a lot of videos of myself doing all these, talks on the. But when you get a video from me asking for money, that's actually real. So don't discard that. That's actually real. Let's shift our focus a little bit to another important topic, and which is critical infrastructure security. And Sally, can you talk about critical infrastructure, security from your lens? What cybersecurity challenges do you see facing, infrastructure sectors like such as energy, transportation, healthcare, for example?
Certainly. So we call it the OT, the IT, and the OT. And what's very interesting about this room, if we wanted to take a look at, we have some light fixtures here, we have some cameras here, and we have some lights along the stairway. These are all very, very susceptible, make me very, very nervous. If we were in a nuclear submarine, I also would be a little concerned about some light fixtures and some lights along a staircase or a deep hole. There are areas in the manufacturing community, in the hospitals for personal information, in other areas for critical infrastructure, which we call the defense industrial base, which we definitely need a major overhaul to secure these, what we call in the Department of Defense, legacy systems. And right now, it's a major priority for the Secretary of Defense to look at IT/OT security.
Great. So this is something which, of course, I would love to hear your thoughts on it, Renata, as well.
Well, like Sally said, the overhaul that's happening right now, we have laser focused on the defense industrial base, and not just because of things like different CMMC certifications. That's a tool, and that's wonderful. But the implementation of such and enabling our ability to partner with the defense industrial base is going to be critical. But aside from that, I think what Sally was pointing out is how do we look at our critical infrastructure in a very different manner. I'm not really sure if everyone would agree with Sally that the lights are critical infrastructure. But when you think about it, because in this room, in order to see and in order to record, you need lighting and you need cameras. And so I think we all have to kind of shift our mindset just a tad bit on understanding why is it critical so that we can do a better job of overhauling the protection that's needed. And that strategy right now is taking a lot of great minds, like in the business departments as well as in the cybersecurity space. Not just, how do you secure it, but strategically thinking from a governance perspective. What are the policies that need to be put in place to enable our ability to overhaul the defense industrial base? And that cross-correlation of business and cyber, I think, is very important.
Excellent points, I think, there. Did you want to add something to that?
I always enjoy when we talk about national critical infrastructure, and we instantly go to Department of Energy and Department of Defense. And I would argue that we have wholeheartedly ignored the most critical infrastructure. When you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the very bottom are physical needs. You can't find a farm anywhere in the United States that doesn't have massive amounts of IT and OT.
Yeah.
And these farmers are very, very smart people, but they're not cybersecurity experts. Presidential Policy Directive 21 mandated that food production and agriculture was a national critical sector, yet there is no ISAC for food and agriculture. Nobody is helping the farmers. Nobody's letting them know that their grain elevators or their tractors or their watering systems are all susceptible. We are, as the saying goes, 4 missed meals away from anarchy.
Yeah.
And I would like to add to that, one thing I'm very proud of is the work in Maryland in Governor O'Malley's administration. We created Cyber Maryland, and we're seeing this come through with Texas and Illinois and many, many states across the country. One of the initiatives that we worked on was the Cyber Guard. We took our National Guard, and it was Cyber Guard. One of our White House administrations asked a question to our Cyber Maryland team, which was primarily consisting of a Fort Meade NSA Cyber Command team, and said, what should we do if the critical infrastructure of the state were to be hacked and were to shut down? We're talking the grid. So if you look at a state and you look at the governor and you had a major attack on a dam, on a water, on a power, on the energy, on the farming community, on the food supply, on the hospitals, the governor would be called as a state of emergency. And normally the governor would call in National Guard. Now we have the Cyber Guard, who can help go from state to state when there's a major hack to support and help get through that, come out on top, and protect the critical infrastructure with the right defenses and the right responses. So I'm absolutely proud of the work we've done to support our National Guard cybersecurity program.
Very good to know. So we talked about a little bit about this critical infrastructure being the area of concern, and software, hardware, supply chain issues that we have seen often, including what you mentioned in the Ukraine war that is going on. But how can we really, and you talked about attestation and confirmation, how can we be knowing that this is that there's a trustworthy software that is relating to us? What kind of attestation and where the data came from is possible to do, especially from the financial sector, for example?
Well, there have been numerous efforts taken by the U.S. government to help with that. SBOM, software bill of materials, so that when you buy a piece of equipment, you know what software is in there, so that when CISA releases a CVE and says, hey, look, there's a problem in this piece of software, you know that you have that piece of software that you're running. And again, it's not just the IT, it's the OT. Nobody thinks about, in a hospital, what software is my mammogram machine running? What software is my incubator in the NICU running? But those things are running Linux and Windows and all of those things that we run in IT. So there's that one. The president just announced the Cyber Trust Mark. There hasn't been a whole lot of information on it, but ostensibly what it means is that the manufacturer will have met a minimum level of secure configuration and secure building before the product is rolled out. I'm cautiously optimistic of that. It reminds me a lot of the Common Criteria program that NSA used to run for national security IT many years ago. So I'm hopeful that we'll get more details and that will help the average American figure out what's trustworthy software and hardware and what it's not.
And I'd love to add to that a big shout out. I'm a huge, huge fan of NIST, the National Institutes of Standards. And I can't get enough of a committee or a subcommittee or an initiative, or specifically in cybersecurity. We are part of the defense industrial base in our Virginia, Maryland, DC community. We are so supportive of every certification and every initiative. And right now, NIST has just completely ramped up what they call, like the cybersecurity risk management framework that we've all been exhaustively throwing ourselves at for over a decade. Right now, we are working on the AI risk management framework. I submitted a white paper recently on behalf of Darktrace to look at AI, autonomous detection, autonomous response, augmenting the human team, but yet, to Pablo's point in the beginning, a human confirmation mode. How can the human stay in the loop with those decisions? Really striking example. If anybody's familiar with the government agency FERC, if you're looking at our nuclear programs, these are contained, secure programs. You do not want an autonomous AI here. You definitely want, for weapon systems, to have a human confirmation mode, a human confirmation decision in that loop. That is most critical. So I do support NIST incredibly. Looking forward to working with them on all of the points you made in the future of AI and cybersecurity.
Excellent point. So just as a reminder, we are going to take some questions. I know I'm getting already some of them here. So if you want to submit your questions for the group here, please do. But let me continue on that theme. You talked about regulation, you talked about standards, you talked about all that. How can regulations keep pace with the cybersecurity? I mean, the things are changing so fast, and it's almost like you have to imagine what the next step is, and it's a cat and mouse game. How do you keep pace with that? What kind of guardrails and standards can we be devising when things are moving so fast? It's almost, to a common person like me who doesn't work on this every day, seems like a very big challenge.
Well, I would think not so much of the governing models or guardrails. It's more of the policies, and accompanying policies are always procedures. But in order to have policy and procedures, you got to start with the frameworks. And so you got to depend on those experts who are out there, you know, working diligently on the frameworks because of all the research that's happening to come up with the framework. So that's one piece. But critical to policies and procedures is something that I've learned that we don't do. I think we miss a lot of opportunity on self-inspection and inspecting ourselves from an audit perspective. You shouldn't have to wait till Morgan Stanley or SEC comes in and says, you shouldn't be doing X, Y, Z. It should be something that we grow internally to make sure that we're checking the boxes as best as we can to make the best decision based on risk. I think that's how you get your arms around it. I don't think you try to solve for AI and ML. I think that's I don't think that's a great approach because, you know, technology is going to continue to evolve. But creating policy that sets parameters, for example, we have a document that's floating around right now on how we even adopt and bring in artificial intelligence into the United States Marine Corps. Well, part of that is many reference materials that are out there on the SBOM. You have to make sure you have that in place. You have to make sure you've reached out to certain approval spaces who have security mechanisms in place that create those parameters or containerization at some point. We also have a little bit of large language modeling restrictions there. You know, there are just certain things you don't get to program algorithms to do within the DoD space. There's a way we address the biasness. So there's many ways you can put the parameters in place without trying to eat the entire elephant, but still have those parameters and guardrails that protect us just enough to still be an adoption of newer technology, but still have those same restrictions. I like to call them the seatbelt. I'm not going to stop you from driving the car, but I'm going to make you wear a seatbelt. And every now and then you're going to see a sign that says speed limit. And if you speed, not only do you get a ticket, but we're going to kick you off the system because we need to figure out, you know, where the danger has occurred.
Right. Great point. And let me ask you, following up on that, perhaps others can join in on this one too. But really, you know, all of us are using so many more smart devices. And when it comes down to the internet connected things here, we are going to be vulnerable. What is that seatbelt on a personal level should I be having so that I'm not speeding to a point where I'm going to end up creating myself a problem?
If I may, I'd love to compliment Renata's last point, which
Sure.
is, for me, it is testing, testing, testing. Using, of course, the driver's license, using, of course, the policeman stopping and giving you a ticket, using the constant testing, the constant warning, the constant alerting. The policies come up, the legislation comes up, the laws are going to come up, which we haven't even really begun, which we really need to focus on. It's going to be the testing in all the systems to make sure as these novel attacks are coming in, right, from generative AI, we have to keep embracing and testing and learning, growing. And I think the testing and the penetration testing is a really big move and an important for the auditing and the compliance piece.
I'd actually go back earlier than that. My bachelor's and master's were in computer science. So I'm gonna throw rocks at my own community here and say, computer science is barely a science. It's a bad engineering discipline. And here's what I mean by that. If you're a civil engineer, you probably saw the Tacoma Narrows Bridge collapse 100 times before you graduated. If you're a naval architect, you probably studied the Titanic sinking. Engineers, professional engineers in every other discipline spend an inordinate amount of time planning and designing for failure and for that failure to be safe. Computer scientists do not do that. We don't teach that in schools. On top of that, there's been a troubling trend that I've seen in academia, which is there's a lack of teaching of ethics. Regulations are really the last vestige after something goes horribly wrong. there should be a lot of sound engineering and ethical discussions in design, secure by design, safe by design, before anything rolls to production. There are schools in this country where they teach students how to make their digital products more addictive. And they are very highly sought after by the students. There is no required composite course or companion course on ethics and why you may not want to do that.
Yeah.
And I would suggest that's problematic.
I think you bring a great point, and I was going to ask you some of the things that we should be doing in higher education. And I think ethics comes up often, including at the forum when we were talking about on cybersecurity. And actually, one of these questions from the audience is related to what you're talking about. And this is who programs the machines? That sometimes is the crux bias or the subjectivity to overcome. And you mentioned bias and you mentioned fairness. So how do we take care of fairness and bias when we are talking about artificial intelligence, for example?
Yeah, I think you first personally have to know your people. You know, you can tell just by bringing in professionals. You know, I'm not saying I'm a psychologist because I am not, but I know a lot of psychologists. I know a lot of psychiatrists. I know a lot of criminal behavior analysts that work in this cybersecurity field. We consult with them to identify hackers. What was the bad guy thinking when they did this? So we have to take advantage of that level of expertise when we start to try and understand where are the parameters that we put in place for artificial intelligence and our programmers. And what we can't be afraid to do is adopt a level of diversity. We can't be discriminatory. We can't say, well, they come from, the farm, so they probably wouldn't be able to, provide these types of algorithms. So we first got to know our people and understand as leaders, and I'm going to date myself a little bit here, as leaders, we have to understand the ramifications of the technology. We have to be able to explain to programmers why ethics is so important, why your training being up to date is so important, all the way into the design and even back all the way up to the requirement. If we don't have a true understanding of the requirement, then how do you put the guardrails in place for algorithms that are being programmed by, potentially areas of biasness? I had a chance to study with an unknown high-tech company that set out to do this years and years and years ago. I think I was just 11, 12. It was a little while ago. And that program, and I'll give you the word, it was tomato. It was tomato. It was showing a tomato on a screen. And I'm like, why are they sit here teaching us vegetables and fruits? But what they were trying to show us was why we have to put parameters around this thing right now. And it wasn't even as advanced as we are today. But he sat there and he told the system that the tomato was really a watermelon. And everyone in the room didn't believe that once you asked that question, after a little while, it would tell you that it's a watermelon. And when I saw that, it was life-changing for me because eventually the guy typed it in and said, this is a watermelon. And it finally spit out. It kept saying, it's a tomato. It's a tomato, tomato, tomato. And it finally said watermelon. And he was a professor proving the ethics and why he wanted to write curriculum on ethics. And I won't tell you the IT company and I won't tell you the school, but there is an ethics course right now in one of the schools that adopted AI very early. So I think we have to do those kinds of things. Testing, knowing your people, understanding the technology. And as leaders, we can't be afraid to be the one in the room asking the hard question.
Great points. And I think each one of you has brought in a conversation and centered around that it is about people. So I want to hear from each of you on what you are doing, what in Marine Corps or in Morgan Stanley or in Darktrace to really, innovating to be able to train and bring the people up to speed with this so that they can be facing cybersecurity risks much better.
So I would like to start and also piggyback on what Renata said. I think I'm very, very proud of an organization as a leader. It's really coming from human resources. That training and that training and that training. I know I said testing, but the training is the education and the training, then you are tested. But the HR big teams with incredible empowering leadership are training everyone in cybersecurity, training everyone in ethics, training everyone in diversity, equity, and inclusion, training everyone on, look, if the guy behind you forgot his pass, do not let him in that door. That's a cybersecurity issue because that pass is connected to the internet. So it is so much a part of physical and cybersecurity and people and machines all working together. And I think as humans, we do need to constantly be trained. If we run our families, if we run our workplaces, if we help our neighborhoods and our communities, we all have a responsibility. And I think the president's latest national presidential cybersecurity implementation plan, if you read through it with an eye of democracy, you can kind of tell that the president's initiative is asking each American to take a responsibility for ourselves, our families, our communities, and our businesses and our economies so that we are all secure.
Great. So I had promised the audience that I will start taking questions if they are here in 15 minutes or less. So there is 15-minute mark almost. So I'm going to start taking some questions. So I have no idea what these questions are at this point. So I'm going to bring them in, and you are responsible for answering them appropriately. So here's the first. No, I think they all look good so far. So this is the first one, which says, given that Teslas and other car companies are using fully software-based autonomous driving or navigation systems, what are some ways to protect against attacks against these systems? I don't drive a Tesla, that's why. That is the foolproof way, I think.
Well, I would not trust one of those systems. I wouldn't trust any car that says that they have an autonomous system. So here's a fun question to ask. I guarantee you that whoever designed the suspension system and the steering system for that has a professional engineer's license as a Mackie. I don't know if the person that designed the software running that car has a PhD in computer science from Berkeley, or they taught themselves Python programming by picking a book up from Amazon. There is no professionalization of code writers. All of the computers that we use, it doesn't matter if it's a PC, it doesn't matter if it's a smart thermostat, it doesn't matter if it's a Tesla car, they're all built off a model of computing called Turing machines. And they all have the same fundamental problems.
Yep.
There is no magic in the box. Pablo's definition of artificial intelligence is a set of neat statistical parlor tricks to fool muggles into thinking there's intelligence in a box. There's no intelligence there. There's statistical models.
That's
The problem that we have is we really want to believe that there's magic in that box. We want to believe the car can drive itself. We want to believe that Alexa knows the answers to all of our questions. We want to believe that ChatGPT can write my term paper for us. It can't. And the sooner we believe that, the sooner we can become more responsible users of the technology.
And the next thing you're going to tell us is that Santa Claus is not real.
No, he's real. He's real, and so's the Easter Bunny. Let's don't confuse.
Here's the other question that has come up. You know, a couple of weeks ago, the White House released a report outlining how it will implement its national cybersecurity strategy. A key aspect of the plan includes coordination, not just across federal agencies, but also with the private sector and through public-private partnerships. And that became a big topic even in our forum, when we were Cybersecurity Forum that we organized on April 25th. What is your take on the significance of this? Why are public-private partnerships so important to mitigating cybersecurity risks?
Well, the private is ahead of government and can really contribute. And the government is open to hearing and collaborating on what the industry is doing. So we have now all agreed that a combination of industry and government together is a win-win situation.
There's also a fundamental issue there. We're talking about national critical infrastructure. And the United States is one of the few countries where the vast majority of national critical infrastructure is privately owned. It's not owned by the government. And so if the government wants to protect that national critical infrastructure, they have to work with the industry that owns that critical infrastructure. There's really no other way.
Yeah, aside from, proprietary ownership and intellectual property, et cetera, the bad guy is targeting a person, not a thing. They're trying to get to the crown jewels. So if you don't take a person approach, and it's not an institutional approach, it's a person that works for an institution or they work for that particular business. And so if you don't partner with the human beings who go home every day and they connect to their Wi-Fi's at home, and if you don't educate and help everyone understand that this is a cyber warfare that is inclusive of not just who's walking in the Pentagon, not just who's out at the fleet on a ship that's, you know, walking on as a contractor. If we don't see ourselves as cyber warriors together, then you have blind spots, and that's what the adversary is going to target. So aside from the business side of it, aside from the training that's needed and the implications of the benefits of industry and the many things that can be discovered in industry a whole lot faster than the government can discover those things, is for me, it's and I hate to say it no, I don't hate to say it this way. I don't. It's common sense. The fact that we even had to call that out in a strategy is almost disheartening, because if I want you to feel secure when you come to my house, I can't make you stay outside. Well, you're better out there. No, I'm going to let you come inside. If you say, hey, I need to use the bathroom, and do you mind if I connect to your Wi-Fi? I'm going to give you a password. If it says guest and it's public, you should not connect to the Wi-Fi, because I care nothing about your security.
I want your telephone number and address, by the way, because that's the only safe place that I can think of now.
And so that's the way I looked at it. It's kind of like you got to partner, and if there's nothing that is achieved by ourselves, and the many silos that we used to be able to operate in, that's just not it. The bad guy doesn't say, I'm going to target GW. They don't do that. They target an email address that just so happens to be at GW. Right. So we have to partner. Oh, I'm going to target Sally Grant. Yeah, but it's targeting her at Gmail or at Yahoo or some type of domain. So we have to consider those things and pull ourselves away from the silos and understand the business implications and the personal implications.
Back to the priorities question, and to address this question at hand, I am leading an initiative at Darktrace, which is supporting the cyber warfighter on and off the field. Yeah. When our cyber warfighter is off the field, there are weaknesses. Mm-hmm. When I am in an activity and I'm feeling super strong and resilient, I'm still being tracked by my adversary if I'm off my game. And so that is the part that is really concerning to me. I believe in this room, there is greatness in each of us, but because humans are the weakest link, there are moments of our day, of our week, of our month that we may not be aware of what vulnerability is happening. And that is where the attackers are coming in. And that is what makes me very concerned.
And they're using machines to do it.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So that brings us to a next question here, which is going to take you to another level, I think. And this question is submitted, which says, what is the viability of quantum entanglement as a cybersecurity system? And how would it work? Has it been deployed, or is it still in R&D phase?
So last time I checked on quantum entanglement, it was still very much in a research phase. They've gotten much better at the range at which they're able to get quantum entangled pairs to interact. Probably the best use I've heard of for QKD, for quantum key distribution, is the entangled pairs. The challenge then becomes, you generate these particles, they have to be close together. You still have to securely deliver the particle to the distant end. Yeah. Somehow. And so in that sense, it's a really great technology once it's in place, but it's fundamentally not different than symmetric key cryptography via common means. So again, quantum technology, quantum computing shows tremendous promise. It's a fabulous technology. But when you talk to the men and women that are really hip deep in this, that really are at the bleeding edge of innovation in this space, and you ask them things like, does this fundamentally break all common cryptography? Mm-hmm. Most of them will tell you, we don't know. Yep. We don't know. So to Sally's point earlier, NIST has done a fantastic job working with NSA, talking about, well, we think that these are quantum resistant cryptographic solutions. But we just don't know. So it's better to prepare for the cataclysm. I have my own feelings, and hopefully we avoid it than not. But QKD is a wonderful technology, still in research phase, and quantum entanglement is exciting. We are getting better at it.
Mm-hmm. I would simply say that Darktrace discovered between January and February of 2023 135% rise in novel attacks. What kind of novel attacks, how deep we go, how we respond to quantum attacks, again, like Pablo said, is the future of the discovery and that investigation. But it is happening and it is coming.
Yeah. So I think you have scared the audience enough today. So that's why I think this question has come up. And let me see whether you can answer this appropriately. I think I know the answer to this one, but I'm going to pose it to the panel anyway. Will AI always have an off switch to turn it off if it goes haywire? Or will it become so decentralized like blockchain that there is no one place to turn it off? And I think there's a follow-up question for people fearful of AI. I took a survey, nobody was fearful before they entered this room, who are not and have not been using it. Is this irresponsible to shut out the everyday AI in our lives? I think this is being generated by ChatGPT.
I think so, and I think there were I have one question in 42 parts. So will AI always have an off switch? Most of the technology we have no longer has an on or an off switch. When you turn off your cellular phone, it's a software switch. You're not actually guaranteed that it's off. As a matter of fact, it's almost never off these days. It's just in a lower power mode. What I will say is that AI in particular is really funny because about every 20 or 30 years, what we think is AI changes. So in the 60s and 70s, we thought that getting a computer to play chess was AI. In the 80s and 90s, we thought that computer vision was AI. In the 90s, we thought expert systems was AI. AI is whatever we think requires human intelligence that we later find out doesn't actually require human intelligence. It just requires a large enough statistical model. They are tremendous tools if they are used safely.
Smart houses.
Smart houses. Smart houses.
I mean, I don't know if anybody in this room, I'd love to talk to you after. I was with a cybersecurity executive of one of our largest government agencies, and she is embracing a complete smart house. So it was really incredible to be in that for 24 hours because everything was working. And it was an awesome experience. I did have a long drive home that day, and I got a little concerned about the future of the smart house, the future of the smart car, the future of a smarter phone, the future of all our devices. And because I want to make sure, from my perspective, everything is protected, I'm a little concerned.
I mean, when you think about it, you have a user experience we always want to have a good time. We want to have fun. We want things to be convenient. I'm with you on that. But unfortunately, we live in a world and a space where, like my dad used to tell me when I was a little girl, there's evil out there no matter how much good you want to do. And so because of that, that's the same posture we have to take with all of the greatness in technology. So I think there's always going to be a tilting of the scale of greatness in technology, but what do I need to be concerned about? I didn't say fear or scared. Mm-hmm. I just said concerned. And you have the greatness of people like Darktrace and CrowdStrikes of the world and many of the intelligence-based vendors that are providing lots of information for you to be aware of when you're in the business space. Now, in your home, yes, you're going to have to, in your personal life, you got to take a little bit more vigilance and you have to do your due diligence, do some research. But you may not be as 100% involved in artificial intelligence or machine learning in your personal life, but it may spill over into your personal life because of what you do on your day-to-day job. So it's here to stay. The adoption of it is here. I personally like to advise when I get the questions of fear and the things that I've seen from human trafficking, child exploitation, and how technology is being used in that field. And a lot, it is scary, but it's kind of like when you're being chased by a dog. You're scared, but you're going to run. You know, and so it's the same thing. You put those things in place. You know that the dog may bite you, and so how do you protect yourself from that? And you don't expect perfection. You know, perfection is the enemy of good enough. So those are some of the things that I would just advise when you talk about how Pablo scared the entire.
This has never happened before. I'm going to be the positive one.
I do want to have a shout out for Pablo because I'm so honored to be with you and Renata too, and thank you again. The financial community of the Western world, of our country, is absolutely colossal, right, in how they secure my mortgage, my payment, my cards, my transactions at the grocery store. So a lot of times when I'm thinking about a problem and a solution, the North Star for me is the financial community of our country, because the private industry of what we call the FSI-SAC is absolutely one of the best in the world. So thank you, Pablo.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of you. Time passes very quickly when you're having fun, and I think this has been just a terrific conversation. I really enjoyed it. We learned a lot from you. Thank you very much. Please, let's give it up for our panel.